The information and opinions expressed by our guests are not necessarily endorsed by this radio show, nor the radio show hosts. The intent of this radio program is to provide information. We encourage the listener to do their own research and connect their own dots.
It's time for the birth of the new golden era. Welcome to Shattering the Matrix. Your host, Ari Kopel, and co-host, Serena, bring you information that will shatter the matrix and shine light on the conditions and forces that are keeping the planet in third-dimensional density and inspire solutions and positive outcomes. Humanity needs to step up and desire to be freed from the darkness of this prison. No one, no thing outside of ourselves will do this for us. Ari Kopel helps us step into our power and authority that will shatter this prison. Now, be prepared to open up your consciousness, become aware, and emerge victorious by standing in our divine power and divine authority in unison, co-creating a new earth. Now, here's your host of Shattering the Matrix, Ari Kopel, and co-host Serena.
Hi, this is Ari Kopel and Serena with Shattering the Matrix. Today, we have the wonderful guest again. James Bartley is with us, and we are going into part 2 of the end of the Reptilian Overlordship, which is a series that James is doing with us, going really in-depth into this. And a lot of you may be new to our show and may know of James, and then there are some that may not know about James yet and his type of work. So let me go over what James has done in the past. Now, James has investigated alien abductions with an emphasis on reptilian abductions and military abductions known as MILABs for over 20 years. He is a protege of one of the great pioneers of alien abduction research, the late Barbara Bartley, who had coined the phrase the Reptilian Overlordship, and so that's where that comes from. James has conducted field investigations in many of the UFO hotspots in California, Nevada, and Arizona, and has worked with many abductees in MILABs. James also has formerly worked with the intelligence related capacity for the U.S. Naval Air Forces known as NAVAIR. He is an independent historian with an emphasis on intelligence and counterintelligence and special operations. He is a student of military history from antiquity to modern times and has made an in-depth study of military-industrial financial security complex which developed after World War II. He's also been a featured speaker at one of the Roswell conferences in Roswell, New Mexico in late July of 2007, commemorating the 60th anniversary of the famous Roswell crash retrievals. James has also lectured in San Diego, California, Las Vegas, Nevada, Memphis, Tennessee, and in Mississippi. And James also hosted his own radio and internet webcast program based out of Tucson, Arizona in the late 1990s and into the new millennium. He has appeared as a featured guest on public access cable television programs in California and Arizona. His research has been translated into a number of languages, including but not limited to Italian, German, Spanish, and Croatian. And James, welcome to the show of part 2, the end of the Reptilian Overlordship.
Thank you, Ari, and it's great to be here, and I'm really looking forward to our interview today.
Absolutely. So here's what I would love to see if you can get into, James. Because, you know, we've had some conversations, obviously offline, and I know that you're really going to go in depth into this today. So I wanted to know if you can go ahead and start talking about the alien manipulation. In other words, the mechanics and the dynamics of an abduction. Okay, so I guess what we want to know is, number one, how aliens manipulate people, what they're trying to achieve by doing that, and what are any of the after effects of an abduction. Can you go into that?
Sure. What I'd like to talk about is the internal dynamics of the reptilian abduction experience in particular.
Okay.
Much has been made over the years about the machinations of the Greys and some of the other beings, But today I'd like to focus particularly on what reptilians do to male and female humans.
Okay.
So I'd like to start on that vein.
Fantastic.
Many of your listeners are women. By process of elimination and statistical probability, some of them have had reptilian experiences. So the first part of this will deal with what women experience when they have encounters with reptilians. What the reptilians do is they insinuate their DNA, their seed, if you will, into certain bloodlines. We've heard others talk about this, David Icke and others, but it's a very real phenomenon. And what happens is, over time, some women, human women, wind up having a certain amount of DNA and a certain compatibility, if you will, with these reptilian beings. And one thing about these reptilian beings, they are rapacious. They rape women. They sexually assault women. And this is how they go about doing that. The reptilians are masters of frequency and resonance. They can alter their density. They can be invisible in the visible spectrum, but can still impress like weight upon a mattress or upon a carpet or upon a sofa. For example, a certain type of earth woman may have psychic abilities which allows them to see into other planes and see entities that other people cannot see. So what happens sometimes is these reptilians will appear to these women, and the reptilians will be invisible to everyone else, but the woman may be able to see them because she has second sight. And other people in the room may not be able to see the reptilian, but they can see the weight that the reptilian is placing upon a mattress, upon some other physical object. And this is important to understand because reptilians do not have to be visible in the visible spectrum in order to rape a woman or otherwise interact with people in general. And this is one of the ways which they do it. The reptilian will appear to the woman oftentimes when the woman is asleep, and it will insinuate itself into her astral dreamscape. And the reptilian may choose to appear in the guise of a former lover of the woman, someone that the woman is attracted to, either in the present time or in the past, a famous male entertainer or movie star or a musician. It runs the gamut, all the different guises these reptilians have adopted when they've raped human women, everyone from Tommy Lee Jones to Tom Cruise to Bruce Springsteen to even Michael Jackson, if you could believe that.
That's definitely not believable.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so what happens is the woman feels oftentimes paralysis, and then whilst lying in bed, and if she has a partner, the partner may be laying next to her, and he will oftentimes be immobilized and put into a state of deep sleep. So he cannot wake up or even sense the commotion going on right next to him in the same bed. And what will happen is the reptilian will appear in the guise of someone that the woman may be attracted to, and then she will be immobilized and feel a state of paralysis. Oftentimes she'll feel a pressure on her chest, and then the reptilian will begin to have intercourse with her. Now, if she becomes lucid during this process, or semi-lucid rather, she may think that she's having intercourse or an erotic dream, and she may go along with it. And other times what happens is the reptilian may want to engender fear in the woman, because there's an energetic harvesting process that takes place. We humans are resonators. We are emitters of frequency, and it behooves these archontic entities, be they reptilians or some other being, to have us in a low vibratory state of fear, of rage, anger, anxiety, and or heightened sexual arousal, because they feed off of that. So the reptilian will begin to have intercourse. If the woman is semi-lucid, she may go along with it, she may not go along with it. And then at times the reptilian may want to engender the fear response. So what it could do is allow her to see the reptilian in its real actual appearance. And what this does is it engenders fear in the woman. And what the reptilian can also do is, if the woman had endured childhood sexual abuse or rape any time of her life, these entities, these reptilians, have a way of tapping into their memory banks, if you will, and make that woman relive in real time the abuse that she had suffered in the past, and even have a way of drawing to the surface the actual body memories that the woman has from being abused either as a child and or an adult. Because when people in general, women in particular, are sexually abused, that abuse remains in the body in the form of a blocked trauma. If it hasn't been safely released, it stays in there. And that blocked energetic trauma, negative trauma, along with the attendant real-time memories that went along with those events, can be summoned forth by these entities. And I can elaborate later, but some reptilian human hybrids who appear totally human also have this ability to bring forth the blocked body memories and traumatic body energy, as well as the imagery. And another thing that's important to understand is these beings, because they're masters of frequency and resonance, they can penetrate layers of bedding, of night clothes, whatever the case may be, and either vaginally or anally rape a woman. Now, let's say the woman, when she realizes that it's a reptilian being on top of her, and she feels the pressure, she feels the paralysis. I should add also, these reptilian beings, just as a tiger or a lion, when they roar and they're about to slay a human victim, right? The tigers, when they roar, the roar has a reverberating effect on the chest cavity of the human they're about to devour, and so it induces paralysis. It's something that a lot of the big felines and the predatory animals have. Well, the reptilian, because it has a way of engendering the fear response, it also has this ability, like I said, to engender paralysis and abject fear. And what if the woman is able to move her hands, for example, she may try to block her loins from the member of the entity, and paradoxically, she may not feel the member of the entity with her hand. She may not feel the entity, the member, as she tries to block it. Right. But paradoxically, she still feels the vaginal and or anal penetration. So there's something of a paradox, and again, it speaks to the fact that these beings are masters of resonance and frequency and density. Not only can they densify their entire bodies into a given frequency, but they can densify particular parts of their anatomy only. Wow. And there are variations where the woman could see absolutely nothing. The entity could be invisible, and the woman may not have the means, she may not have the psychic ability to see these entities, right? And again, because it varies, the woman may be still thinking she's having an erotic dream, and she may not become entirely lucid it depends on what the entity wants to do. If it just wants to have intercourse with her and not engender that fear response, it may stay in the guise of a human being, the rock star, the entertainer, the person she's attracted to, her ex-lover, whatever the case may be. And also, if it chooses to manifest so the woman can see the entity in the visible spectrum, that brings on the fear response, and the woman, by expressing all this energetic emotion of fear and anxiety, the entity will feed off that. Now, another thing that's key to understand is, because these entities are masters of frequency and resonance, they have the ability to activate the kundalini, the sexual chi of the woman. So oftentimes when the reptilian rapes the woman, and some of these reptilian rapes can last for quite a long time, when the woman does have a climax, an orgasm, it is a full body orgasm from the tips of their toes all the way to their crown chakra. It's a full on complete body orgasm. And when the entity leaves, and whether it chose to stay in the illusion within the dreamscape scenario that I outlined earlier, or whether it chose to scare her by allowing itself to be seen, and then when it departs, the woman will lay there breathless, just completely exhausted. And some of the side effects of this are heightened libido, which could last for hours and or days or sometimes weeks, because these entities, they form this obsessive attachment with the human female. They see the entity as being their mate. And sometimes, whether it's a case of Stockholm syndrome, and there are some women who choose to regard these entities as their mates. Some could argue it's a karmic thing, or some choose to believe they made a decision to be the mate of these entities. I'm not judging them. These are the various explanations and stories that I hear from various women, and some women don't like it, and some women kind of go along with it because they can't really do anything about it. So some of the after effects are a heightened libido, along with a heightened libido because of the forceful kundalini rising through all the woman's chakras. Incidentally, this is exactly what maguses and adepts do, these warlocks who do the tantric sex, Aleister Crowley and his Scarlet Women, for example. Mm-hmm. In the days and sometimes weeks after these experiences, the woman can be temporarily very psychic indeed, because their crown chakra, everything has been intensified. Other side effects are candidiasis, yeast infections.
Wow.
Yes, and what the reptilians could do is they could, because they're so possessive of these women at times, they could manipulate the olfactory senses mm-hmm. of the women, i.e. their sense of smell. So they could manipulate the woman's sense of smell to the point where regular male human pheromones are repulsive to the woman. So that when she's out and about in society, whether she's at home with her partner or out and about in society, the scent of the human male pheromone is repulsive to her, and she wants nothing to do with any male. No intercourse, no interaction, no nothing, because again, these entities are very they're very selfish. It's part and parcel of what I've described in the past as the reptilian concept of human ownership, in microcosm, in extremis, where they literally take up people as hosts, mm-hmm. and in macrocosm, where they feel that they own this whole society and civilization and can depopulate us or do whatever they want to us at their leisure. Now, the other side effects are, and it depends on the category the reptilians are trying to slot a particular woman, because for the abductees they work with, whether they're males or females, let me take a little sip of water here. oftentimes the reptilians and the Greys and other entities working with the reptilians strive to slot abductees into certain categories, and they will create this whole program of behavior modification, astral dreamscape manipulation, so on and so forth, to engender certain behavioral changes within people. And one of the things they try to do with a certain category of female human abductees is promote sadomasochism, bondage and discipline tendencies within them. Again, with no shame involved. I'm not here to judge or label people. A lot of people act out in certain ways because of this externally imposed manipulation, and oftentimes they're not aware of the implications of this manipulation, because they don't have a conceptual framework with which to try to understand it. That's why I'm here on the show.
Yeah,
so,
James, if I may ask a question at this
sure.
point, now that you say that. The question is, what you're talking about with the reptilians is something that you understand, having been on the other side of that. But people who are not aware of this whole program that is happening with them, for example, these women who are having these experiences with, as you say, these rock stars or fantasies with ex-boyfriends or lovers or whatever, couldn't it be a more common thing that women think that they're just having fantasies in general with these ex-boyfriends or whatever, and this fantastic, secret life that they have, having no idea that there are reptilians involved or anything else, and that this could be far more widespread than what anybody thinks?
You're absolutely right, because some of these entities, these male reptilian entities, they choose to maintain the illusion of being, and it's not just famous human males, rock stars, movie stars. They can appear as a Nordic Palladian spaceman.
For example, gurus as well.
Or a guru, yes. And see, there are variations of this, because there are people out there who know they are full-on reptilian or Draco-human hybrids that have the ability to astral travel, that have the ability to remote view, and they're reptilian familiars, as I call them. The family tracks them generationally. These reptilian familiars guide them and train them and nurture them and show them how to use these astral and actually also astral raping capabilities. So it's not only full-on reptilians that do this kind of rape, but it's also these reptilian human hybrids, many of whom are in the UFO community. Some of them are UFO researchers, ironically,
wow,
that have this ability. So what happens is, say the woman hasn't had a human partner for quite some time, is kind of lonely, and she kind of lives an insular life. And she may be childless, or she may have children, raising them on her own. What these entities can do is provide, for lack of a better term, an outlet, a sexual release, a fantasy come to life, if you will. And as long as the entity doesn't allow itself to be seen for what it really is, or allow the woman to break from the enchantment, the illusion, then these things can go on for quite some time.
So I think you just covered most of the women on the planet, basically, because if women who have a private sexual fantasy life don't even know what they're engaged with, really.
This is true, but it works both ways. There are cases of males, human male abductees, who think they're having a torrid, long-standing relationship with a Palladian Nordic space woman. I've spoken to males who believe they were having almost nightly relations with a Palladian blonde space woman, but down the line, sometimes months down the line, the illusion wears off in the middle of the sex act, and they realize they're not with a Palladian space woman, but rather with a reptilian. Oftentimes, it's the brownish light underbelly. We call them yellow bellies. Some of the reptilians have lighter undersides, like yellowish or whitish undersides, like you see with Earth reptilians, like gators and crocodiles, or some lizards where they have a lighter underside. Some of the reptilians, we call them yellow bellies. That's what they're like. They have a lighter underside. And one guy in particular came to during sex with what he thought was a Palladian space woman 6 months after the relationship started. And he snapped out of it in the midst of the act and realized he was with a female yellow belly reptilian. So those things happen too. And some people are very conscious of the fact they're having relations with a male reptilian, if it's a woman, or if it's a female reptilian with a male reptilian, right? So they're aware. Some of them are aware that they're having these relationships, and they actually want them to continue. I know human hybrid female abductees, like I said, who regard these reptilians as their mates and their protectors.
Geez. Now, are these encounters with these people, whether they're... Now, do they always have to be hybrids? Does the human partner always have to have that DNA, that bloodline, or can it be just regular folks without that DNA bloodline?
It can be regular folks. It's more likely to happen with people with a certain reptilian enhanced DNA, if you will. Mm-hmm. Especially this is the case with women who happen to have the negative. What's that bloodline? The
Rhesus, yeah.
Yes, that's the Rhesus Rh negative. And people have to understand where the term comes from. Well, Rhesus is a primate, and for someone to have Rh negative blood, what they're really saying, in so many words, is that this particular individual, does not have any trace of any kind of simian DNA heritage. Well, it begs the question, well, if they don't have any simian primate heritage, then what is it then, right?
Right.
Well, so some of these women have this Rh negative bloodline, and it makes them even more compatible to these reptilian entities. And it could just be a statistical fluke, but I've come across many women who are practicing Wiccans, mm-hmm. who, and many of them have this reptilian mate kind of reptilian sexual assault syndrome going on in their lives, which actually, when you think about it, wouldn't be surprising, because when you track those Wiccan bloodlines, and of course, not only do the Wiccan bloodlines may skip a generation, but there's a karmic element too, where someone really could have been a Wiccan high priestess in another life, and then they come into this life, and they're pretty much a Wiccan again. Well, these entities, they're aware of that, and they seem to track those women in particular. Again, it could be a statistical fluke that just about most of the Wiccan women that I've met have had this in their background, right? Could just be a coincidence, but maybe not.
So there's a high correlation between the Rh negative blood type and being pretty much assaulted this way by the reptilians, so it seems. Now, what would be the point? Is this strictly an attraction, where they're having sex because, it's, the thing to do? Or is it they're really looking for procreation? And if they are looking for procreation, then what is the point of having the anal sex aspect of it?
Those are all very good questions.
Well,
very good questions.
I had to ask.
And again, there are different types of side effects. It could be discharges, fluid discharges from one or the other orifice, like I said, yeast infection, so on and so forth. To answer one of the questions first, sometimes there is a procreative aspect to this. We've heard again and again about the gray hybridization process, and not many people talk about the reptilian-human hybrid process. I've spoken to a number of women who have very clear memories of having little scaly reptilian infants taken out of their wombs in childbirth, basically. And what typically happens is the woman will have what amounts to a dream or a nightmare of doctors, OBGYNs, doing some kind of gynecological procedure to her. In the process, the woman observes them pulling out this very scaly, reptilian-looking fetus, very much like the scene in the original V series, if you remember that.
Oh, yeah.
And then the woman... sometimes the woman can actually see reptilians doing this process, pulling the hybrid out. And sometimes her vision is distorted. She's given the illusion that they're very, very tall, like doctors, right? And they pull this hybrid scaly fetus out of her. The next morning when she awakes, she may feel extreme cramping, hemorrhaging. She may sit on the toilet and quite a lot of blood will come out, and sometimes even like a fetal sac will come out from her yoni. I know of cases where women have actually, while they were sitting on the toilet, have actually like birthed, so to speak, like a little fetus. So sometimes a little gray fetus or sometimes a little reptilian one, but often is not. What happens is before too long the entities come back and they take that away. But that happens too. Now, as far as the aspect of the anal rape, the nerves around the anus and the sphincter are very sensitive, and there's a direct connection via the vertebrae, the spine, and all the nerves connected with the spine, straight up to the crown chakra. So you see this also in highly ritualistic cults, covens, what have you, where the adept, the warlock or magus will sodomize like a male or a female initiate, or some of the more horrid ones, even children, right? Well, it's pretty much, if it's all against their will, it's all horrid anyway. But there's behavior, a modification agenda. There's an energetic manipulation agenda behind the sodomy. Now, I should point out here, okay, because this always comes up in my talks, and I have to always give a disclaimer so there's no misunderstanding since we're on the topic. Sometimes there is definitely a gender reorientation agenda, if you will, where sometimes these entities, be they reptilians, greys working for the reptilians, manus beings, so on and so forth, they will sexually manipulate a male or a female in order to either behaviorally modify them into acting out in certain ways. Like I said earlier, there's the sadomasochistic bondage and discipline programming, and there's also at times an effort to change the orientation of certain individuals. Now, this is not a hard and fast rule. Please, your listeners, don't hear what I didn't say. I'm not saying that anyone who is gay, homosexual, whatever anyone wants to label it, I'm not saying that they're like that because the reptilians made them like that. No, that's like an absolutist simplistic generalization. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that within the reptilian sexual manipulation, there is a program to manipulate certain people in order to encourage them to alter their orientation. And
why do they do that, James? Why do they do that?
Well, let's take the case of a male who's having his gender preference altered, let's say. because of the anal rape that they're being subjected to. And now that we're on the subject, and I hate to digress, but it's important before we run out of time, these interviews go so fast, that I talk a bit about the astral dreamscape manipulation, because I touched on it briefly earlier, talking about when women are raped by reptilians. Well, when males are raped by reptilians, a lot of it is done in the astral dreamscape. And here is how that process takes place. It's what I call the bait and switch technique. The male will be having what they believe is an ordinary dream, which after a while starts to morph. What these reptilians are able to do, because they're masters of frequency and resonance, they can actually enter into the sleeping person, male or female. If the person happens to be awake before, during, or after this whole experience, they may sometimes see the reptilian as an amorphous, dark shadow or cloud hovering a couple of feet above them in the bed. And what these entities do is they alter their frequency so they can penetrate into the sleeping person, and they take over the person's astral dreamscape and create what I call a stage-managed dream. And this is a very common scenario I'm going to outline now, this astral dreamscape manipulation. The male, in our example, may find himself in a house that doesn't have any furniture, oftentimes what's described as wooden floors, wooden walls, no furniture. And the very atmosphere, the aura of this astral dreamscape setting is highly charged sexually. Because what these entities are able to do, the astral dreamscape, the lower planes of the astral dreamscape can be highly sexually vibey, energized anyway. But what these entities do is, not only is there an astral dreamscape manipulation where they're creating the stage-managed dream, because they're inside the entity, the sleeping person, but there's a parallel physical manipulation where they activate the sexual arousal mechanism of the sleeping person. So in the astral dreamscape, the male is walking around this empty house. He's walking from room to room, wooden walls, wooden floors, and he's feeling very sexually aroused. Finally he walks into a room, and he finds a woman sitting on, say, like a lounge chair or on a sofa, and she's nude, and she positions herself in a very sexually enticing way, let's say. And the guy doesn't need to have telepathic abilities to know what the woman wants, and he's sexually aroused anyway, because there's this parallel sexual manipulation arousal mechanism that's going on. So what happens is the male in our example quickly positions himself in such a way as to mount this woman and initiate intercourse with her. And what happens is, as soon as the male, and remember, he's walking along this dark, empty house, bereft of furniture, he's just wondering what he's doing there, but at the same time he's feeling this arousal. Next thing you know, he walks into a room, sees this naked woman on a couch, and she's positioning herself for him. So he mounts her, and just as he begins to initiate intercourse with her, just at the exact moment he begins to initiate intercourse with her, he is sodomized from behind by the reptilian entity. Sometimes he can see the entity, sometimes he can't. And the moment he's sodomized from behind, just as he is about to initiate intercourse with a woman, the object of his desires, the woman, suddenly morphs into something which is visually repulsive to him. It could morph into his sister, it could morph into his daughter, it could morph into his son, it could morph into a young boy, it could morph into a strange hermaphroditic half male, half female being with just whatever the case may be. And so what happens is the guy feels the anal pain, and then oftentimes he will wake up and just snap out of it. And what he will then see is directly above him often is not this dark cloud hovering above him, and he will feel from head to toe this icky, tingly sensation, like all of his pores have got this icky, ticky, creepy feeling. And what's happening is the reptilian entity is gradually leaving his body, and it's having this negative adverse effect on the guy's very being because of the negative vibration of the entity. Well, the guy wakes up the next morning and thinks, well, that's a weird dream, or he puts it in the back shelf labeled, too weird, don't think about it, right? And then what happens, and it could be the very next night, it could be a couple of nights later, the same thing happens, right? Where, cut to the chase, he's about to engage in intercourse with another willing woman, and bang, he's sodomized once again, and the object of his desires morphs into something that's absolutely repulsive. The long and the short of it is, if this process continues and the person, the male, is not aware of the nature of the manipulation, sooner or later the male will develop an unconscious association with heterosexual intercourse vis-a-vis anal pain. So he develops this cognitive association. That's the term I was looking for. Mm-hmm. This cognitive association between heterosexual sex and anal pain. And he may not even be aware where it comes from, okay? All he knows is he's got this funny feeling about regular intercourse. And over time, they will begin to manipulate him in his waking consciousness and his especially in his astral dreamscape. And there are variations of this. Let's say in our example, the intention is to make him homosexual. What they will do then in the astral dreamscape is they will create another stage-managed scenario where the guy is this time he's with a guy, let's say, okay, another male. Once again, the atmosphere is very highly sexually charged. His arousal mechanism is activated, and he will be encouraged to do things with this guy, and the voice in his head will tell him, go ahead and do it. No one will know, right? And for example, one of the precursors leading up to this, I forgot to mention, but it's important, is say, and this is like all adult kind of content, so I hope your listeners keep all that in mind, but it's something that people need to realize because this really happens. Say they're trying to get the man acclimated to anal intercourse, and after they have done some of the preceding phases and steps I've just described, what they could do is, in the astral dreamscape, they can once again create the image of a female woman, and what they can do is they can encourage him. He may think it's his own idea, but they may encourage him to vaginally penetrate the woman with his fingers. And it should be pointed out at this point that these reptilians can be hermaphroditic. They can, at times, it seems, have the attributes of a male and or a female, which is very interesting. Also, they will use male reptilians in these manipulations as well. So in this astral dream scenario, the man thinks that he is vaginally penetrating a woman with his fingers, but what's interesting is, as he penetrates the vagina of the woman with his fingers, he feels anal penetration. And he realizes very quickly that the depth of the anal penetration he's feeling is exactly in sync with the depth of the vaginal penetration he's doing upon the woman. So he realizes, okay, when I put my finger in just a little bit into this woman, I feel the same depth of penetration anally. And the voice will tell him, go ahead, no one will know. Go ahead and do it, right? So then he'll put his fingers in deeper into the woman in our example, but it's all astral dreamscape manipulation, stage-managed dream, and he will feel the parallel corresponding anal penetration. The objective eventually is to get him, seemingly of his own accord, to put his fingers in as far as he can into this female in the astral dreamscape stage-managed scenario, and at the same time acclimate himself at his own pace to the anal penetration. And there will be variations of this, where, say, if they want to turn the person into a child molester, as he's going to initiate intercourse upon the woman in these stage-managed dreams, the woman may shapeshift into his own child, his own daughter, and then the voice will tell him, go ahead, no one will know, right? And remember, he's in a highly sexually aroused state. They've already sodomized him, and the nerves from sodomize him multiple times, and the nerves from his anus connect directly to the brain. And this issue with the anal rape, mind control comes up again and again. The Montauk boys, it's steeped in the lore of mind control, basically. But the basis of it started with the reptilians. So that's a variation of it, where they want to turn someone into a child molester, vice someone merely altering the person's gender preference. For example, in the astral dreamscape scenario, the man in our example may be carrying around a young boy, but because of the parallel sexual arousal manipulation, the guy is fully aroused sexually, and yet here he is in the astral dreamscape carrying around a young boy. And once again, the voice in his head is encouraging him, go ahead and do it. No one will know. This is just a dream. You see how that works. But there are variations. If they want to change someone into, say, a serial murderer, and I can talk more about this later because I'm going way off on the tangent again. But through a variety of means, sadistic sexual imagery, so on and so forth, they can turn people, males who are not aware of the nature of the manipulation, into serial murderers. That's how it's done. Now, okay, the anal part, procreation, child, bringing hybrid children into the picture. What was the third question you had, Ari?
Let's see here. It was I don't remember. It was good. It was the anal, the procreation, and I think that was if they were doing it just for procreation or recreation, pretty much I think that was it. I know it was 3 of them, but I can't remember. I think you covered it though.
Yeah, essentially it has to do. You will notice, just to fast forward here, I can talk more about it during this show, or I'd really like to get into it at some point. You will notice that many serial killers, they are impotent. They are impotent because of this process I just described. They cannot attain an erection. They suffer from erectile dysfunction, many of these serial murderers. You looked at Ted Bundy, for example. He talked about scaly creatures coming out of his closet as a child. And this is why it's important for people to study the work of all these profilers, whether they're FBI profilers or whatever the case may be, as it relates to serial killers. I've studied the research of Roy Hazelwood, one of the original, in fact, the original FBI profiler. He was the founder of the FBI's original behavioral sciences unit, I think it was called. John Douglas, just a lot of them. I've studied the lives of and the behaviors of serial killers, and what happens is, now that I'm on the subject, is what these entities are able to do. You see, you will notice with the elite, so-called, these reptilian hybrid bloodlines, the types of characters that pollute places like Bohemian Grove and Bilderberg, so on and so forth. They're almost always child molesters, or almost so many of them, rather, not almost always all of them, but some of them. Some of them are rapists, some of them are perps of various stripes. this, because of their reptilian Draco-human hybrid nature. And remember, I always emphasize this. You always hear engineers and biologists talk about how form follows function. Well, it's the same in this case, where psychology follows neurology, which follows genetics. What these serial killers all have is an undeveloped frontal lobe capacity. The frontal lobe is the impulse control center. It prevents us from acting out in bizarre or violent or impulsive ways. And in these reptilian human hybrids, it's severely diminished or non-existent. Now, this is a perfect storm, because what researchers and scientists have found out is that serial killers not only lack frontal lobe capacity, and this is documented, this is a well-known fact, but they also do not have the ability to control their extremities, their limbs, their body, the way we do, because they act out impulsively. These dexterity tests were conducted upon Joel Rifkin, a well-known serial murderer, and the upshot of all the dexterity tests that the researchers gave Joel Rifkin was that he was basically unable to control his hands, his limbs, his body in general. Here's where the problem is. You talk to any gifted medium or shaman worth their salt, they will talk about downloads that spirit gives them, where they have insight, whether it's about the person they're with, or whether it's about spiritual guidance, insight, past life memories, whatever the case may be. They receive downloads. What these people, these male hybrids who are being groomed for being serial murderers, receive, what their downloads are, is sadistic sexual imagery. Whether they're in the astral dreamscape, when they're sleeping, or even in full waking consciousness. When you study the lives of these serial murderers, they speak again and again about the sadistic imagery which they can't stop from entering their minds. I've spoken to a male human reptilian hybrid who was in the process of being turned into a serial murderer. He contacted me after he read one of my papers when I described this process in detail. And he said that he was at a really low ebb in his life. And it was when he was at that low vibratory ebb is when this manipulation really hit him full force. He began hearing high-pitched tones in his ear, oftentimes his left ear, in full waking consciousness. And when he would be hit by these tones, and sometimes it varies, it could be like a high-pitched metallic, clanging metallic sound. It varies. And sometimes they don't hear tones. But the upshot is, when this particular guy would hear these high-pitched tones in his left ear, he would then start having all this violent, sadistic imagery downloaded into his mind. And over time, and it didn't take long, he began to really resent his girlfriend. He began having erectile difficulties with his girlfriend. Remember, we just talked about this. Right. He wasn't able to perform intercourse with his girlfriend, and his girlfriend, quite understandably, and sometimes the woman can be manipulated to have like a dismissive, contemptuous attitude towards the guy who can't perform sexually. So not only was he feeling poorly about himself because he was suffering from erectile dysfunction, but she was belittling him, belittling his manhood. So he began developing, with the encouragement, of course, of these reptilian familiars, he began developing a severe animus bordering on hostility towards his girlfriend and a hostility towards women in general. Because look at it from his standpoint. He's frustrated. He cannot achieve an erection. He cannot make love with his girlfriend. And the entities are encouraging him in this feeling of animosity towards his girlfriend and women in general. This is where the sadistic imagery took a twist. He began in and out of the astral dreamscape of having dreams, astral dreamscape manipulation dreams, as well as full waking consciousness visions of not only raping women, but his member in these rape scenarios, the sides of his member would be covered with jagged glass. So with every stroke in this rape, he's like tearing this woman asunder. These were the kinds of waking visions, the downloads he was getting. He began having violent thoughts towards his girlfriend and his pet cat. He loved cats. Suddenly he wanted to harm his cat. Suddenly he wanted to pour boiling water on his cat. Suddenly he wanted to rip his cat asunder. He began having lunging fantasies of, whether he was home or out in public, of when a woman is walking towards him in these waking fantasies, he would lunge at her, right? And then later, when he's in public, walking along, and women are passing to and fro, it's all he could do to keep from lunging at them. Because remember, the test, the dexterity test done on Joel Rifkin, serial murderers, or people being groomed for serial murders, sometimes have complete lack of control of their extremities. Because what eventually happens is the entity, the interface, as I call it, takes place. Because the guy in our example who told me the story was at a low vibratory ebb. He was really depressed. So that gave these entities inroads into him. What they do is, if someone has holes in their auric field, holes in their auric shield, holes in their etheric field, if they have a physical malady, and sometimes these entities will go to the trouble of giving somebody a back problem, engineering an accident so they have lower back pain, because and not only for people that are grooming serial killers, but people in general, because it's all about energetic harvesting as well. They feed off the person's misery, anxiety, hopelessness when they have all this lower back pain. But engendering emotional and or physical pain allows these entities, when there are holes in the guy's auric field, and if he has a genetic predisposition in particular to this kind of manipulation, it allows the entities to gain strongholds within him, and then they eventually form what I call the interface, where the guy's vibrations that are such a low ebb, the entity can fully take up the person as a host. And what the person was telling me was, after a while, he felt this large male reptilian entity inside of him. He felt strong, immense surges of power, and he just had this overwhelming compulsion to rape, basically, and kill women. And in these fantasies were frequent sadistic downloads of fantasies of bondage, of tying women up, of sadomasochism, of whipping them, of harming them. This is where a lot of that comes from. And what eventually happened was he snapped out of it, right? And he realized that this entity had taken him up as a host and was going to turn him into a serial murderer. And I lost contact with this guy. I hope that he was able to have a full recovery. But this is like 10, 15 years ago, probably closer to 20 years ago by now. I just hope that the guy snapped out of it. But that gives you an example of how this serial killer programming proceeds. And
James,
another thing, yes.
Yeah, what you're describing here is what I see, the inception and creation of, on this planet, what we have experienced throughout human history as misogyny, patriarchy, pedophilia, boys clubs, as in Skull and Bones, Bohemian Grove, Club 3000, and all of those other boys clubs with all those private exclusive membership there, politics. What you're describing is global and worldwide.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and thank you for recognizing that. And it makes the horrors that go on at Bohemian Grove, at at Skull and Bones and other places, what David Icke talks about and others, and makes it understandable, because these hybrid bloodlines, these ruling elite, if you will, hybrid bloodlines, have these reptilian familiars. Some of these people are perfectly possessed, as Malachi Martin would say, by these entities. They know full well these entities are working through them. They know full well the consciousness working through them is inhuman, because they get sex and sadism mixed up. To them, it's all the same. It's enmeshed. This is why in so many of the hardcore satanic ritual events, you have not only orgies, but these orgies take place like amongst the freshly slain cadavers of victims. I mean, there's entrails lying around. There's decapitated bodies lying around. To a normal person, this is horrifying, but to them, because they get this sexual sadism thing mixed up and enmeshed, to them it's all a big turn on. And thank you for mentioning the thing about the children, because when we welcome our newborns into the world, we welcome them with nurturing, with love and compassion. I'm trying to calm down here. Sometimes I get worked up when I talk about these subjects.
This is difficult. Yep.
It is, because, we all have to deal with the inner shadow, and this kind of stuff really irks me, right?
Yep.
So, and we welcome our young with love and nurturing, and we provide a protective environment for them, completely backwards opposite of these hybrid ruling bloodlines. They welcome their young into the world by abuse, by rape, by torture, and by murder. Right?
You see, my God. Who needs this? Who needs this? My God, why is this even here?
Well, what it is parasitism. It's energetic harvesting, but it's also utilizing us as a resource. And this is the problem, and I must say here, this is the problem. So many of these people who are only clued into what I call surface level stuff, right? The outward manifestations of the reptilian overlordship, i.e. the New World Order, the Illuminati. But even there's a lot of cognitive dissonance there. Okay, they know that these Illuminists and these hybrid, these elite are all into weird rituals and all into sacrifice and whatnot. But I guess they feel that these high level adepts worship other high level adepts. They don't realize that the beings they worship and draw power from are non-human entities. Because conceiving of, let alone executing, this agenda, which is thousands of years in the making, is completely beyond the abilities of a strictly human consciousness. Okay? We're talking about full spectrum dominance, where the very religions they've created are patriarchal, monotheistic, earth destroying. You look back at post this latest series of cataclysms, a mere 13,000 years ago, which in geologic time terms, folks, was last week. Okay, let's not forget that.
Right.
So 13,000 years ago, after all these celestially driven cataclysms, the survivors, when they began developing civilization again, they were almost overwhelmingly matriarchal. They all venerated the mother goddess, the mother archetype, the Venus archetype. They were all into agriculture, animal husbandry. They worshipped, they understood the seasons and the harvest, and they still carried forth the ancient stellar wisdom, and they used it for beneficial purposes. So what the reptilians did, because there wasn't as many people they had to deal with because of the mass extinction event, they began genetically manipulating the surviving bloodlines, and eventually corrupted these bloodlines, and eventually took them over from within. You hear Michael Thazarian talk about this. He's absolutely right that a lot of the ancient stellar wisdom that was being brought forward, even Freemasonry was infiltrated and corrupted and taken over. And he talks about how Madame Blavatsky was warning people about this Illuminati infiltration of theosophy. He's absolutely right. It was Alice Bailey and all those illumined individuals infiltrated theosophy and perverted it and corrupted it. And you fast forward to this day, now you have these people suffering under this custodial monotheistic religious mindset. Well, they dismiss anything of a nature worshipping thing as being inherently of necessity satanic. To them, anything of a metaphysical spiritual nature, it's all satanic, never realizing they themselves are part of this process to deny us of our natural birthright, to deny us of our natural innate connection with divine source, with divine guidance. And I say over and over again, it's not about coming here to learn like the New Agers say. Right. We have to remember who we were and what's been denied us, and who our former greatness, recapture our former greatness, because the human race has been corrupted from within. And what the people that are only aware of the surface level have to understand, I understand that it's a lot to chew, it's a lot to swallow at one go, that we are not at the top of the food chain, but eventually they will have to realize that when you consider Fukushima, when you consider GMO, the death of the honeybees, so on and so forth, the deliberate poisoning of the Gulf of Mexico and the whole world's oceans, what we have here is a non-human intelligence using up our whole planet and all the resources on it, all the life forms, all the DNA, using it up with the intention of leaving it as a burnt out, cored out, irradiated husk of its former self. Because no sentient being would so pollute our world with radiation, just as one example, the way that they are doing to this planet. Because you look at a lizard, it suns itself on a rock. Well, it's absorbing solar photonic energy. It's absorbing radiation. Okay? They can do this. But what they have done, because a lot of these beings are cavern dwellers, they live in subterranean places, a lot of them. Some of them are spacefaring, or both. Well, with this comprehensive chem sky, we have a perma-chem sky haze nowadays, that's making it easier for them to exist on the surface, because their hybridization process is at full bore right now. These reptilian human hybrids, imbued with the sadistic bloodlust, they're everywhere at all strata of society. And that's why we see society going crazier by the moment. Even people that are relatively well-grounded, even spiritually, emotionally, psychologically grounded, metaphysically grounded, are having a difficult transition period because the frequencies are increasing. So before I ramble on, do you guys want to say anything?
Yeah, I had a lot of things to say, but I'm just letting you go with this because I don't want... Yeah. Wow. Well, I have a quick, comment. It's like, yes, they seem to be out to destroy pretty much everything, all life. But my question to you, and I don't even know if we have an answer to this, it's just I'm throwing it out there, is that once they've destroyed everything, including the food source, which is us, where do they go from there? Is it, what, they go to a different planet like locusts and go and destroy that, or what do you think?
It's from what I understand of it, it's a two-part answer. First of all, we all know that the soul is everlasting. And what these entities have done, because they've cast the spiritual net over this planet and compels people to reincarnate again and again oftentimes in complete ignorance of what has gone on before, right? So not only are they compelled to come through here into this theater of pain and have to eke out a subsistence living, which each incarnation seems to get worse and worse, the control system around us. Not only does that go on and all the energetic harvesting and physical harvesting that goes with it, but also what they have done is they have been capturing, I don't say this to many people, but they have been capturing over millennia souls. Not only do they break off fragments of living people, soul fragments off living people, and energetically drain it, thus debilitating the person whose soul fragment was taken, but over the eons, not on just this world, but countless other worlds, other civilizations, because they've repeated this process again and again and again in other worlds. And when they're through with this world, they're going to go on to another world. They capture these souls and in mass, many of them, and they use them as an energy source. Now, we already see this because many gifted shamans, mediums, healers, what have you, they have the second sight and they can see into other planes, other dimensions, and in their meditations they know that in these other dimensions and other planes, these negative archontic beings, could be reptilians, could be snake entities, mantis, and beings that most people have never even seen. They create these huge machines which have these tentacles and hoses which connect into our matrix, our reality, and it basically sucks the loosh, if you will. That's the term that others have developed. I think Robert Monroe came up with the term energy from our reality, and like we discussed earlier, they strive to keep us in a low vibratory ebb of fear, rage, anger, resentment, etc., through the entertainment and all these contrived wars. That's the kind of energy that they prefer, because it disempowers us and it feeds them. And not only do they store it and they suck it up with these tentacles into these other planes, which they use at the power of their technology and nourish themselves at our expense, but they basically just suck the energy from this plane. But that's part and parcel of the whole agenda of entrapping entire souls, right? So that happens too. So on the one hand, it's an energetic soul manipulation. On the other hand, when they're finished with this world, and the reason they've accelerated their agenda is because they know they're pushing up against a celestially driven timetable. Again, it goes back to the complete ignorance fostered by the universities, which are all controlled anyway. Because everyone should know that Earth goes through these periodic celestially driven cataclysms, mass extinction events. It's just the way it is. And when you look at it in terms of scale, it's not even a rare event throughout the cosmos. These things happen quite frequently throughout the cosmos. And we're on the cusp of them again, and we're already seeing ominous portents of that. Fireballs, sinkholes, pole shifts. If it wasn't for this chemtrail permahaze, we'd be seeing a second sun oftentimes, because of this extra mini solar system is back in our solar system again. So all of this is going on, and the reptilians and the other archontic entities know that they're pushing up against a celestial timetable, so they want their pound of flesh, DNA, and their souls now, because they know that a mass extinction event is coming. So when they're finished with this planet, they're going to move on to other planets. And eventually what they may do is they may come back here, and when the survivors come out of their caves after the celestially driven cataclysms, they'll begin the whole process of genetic manipulation, foisting custodial religions, so on and so forth, right?
All over again, right?
All over again. So it's up to us to make sure that that doesn't happen. I mean, really, there's only so much we could take, you know what I mean? But
yeah.
Don't you think God has something to do with that too? I mean, I think divine intervention is necessary. People don't know what's happening, especially when they're coming out of the caves.
Serena, Ari, you are part of that divine intervention. Ari is part of that divine intervention. Your listeners are part of that divine intervention. You see, there are a lot of us who are infiltrators, we're paradigm busters, we're subverters. We mapped out our incarnations in such a way that we would derive all this knowledge. And some of us incarnated into quite tyrannical, authoritarian, wicked regimes. But there was occulted secrets in those regimes, and we needed to see what it was like to be a part of such a archontically controlled authoritarian system. It was part of our soul's educational process, if you will, where we had to be a part of that. we had to understand what it's like to be on the inside of these control systems. So now, and this I'm speaking to a lot of the MyLabs out there too. You have successfully infiltrated this Archontic control system. Congratulations. Now we have to take it to the next level. We have to reclaim our divine birthright and recover as much of the ancient stellar wisdom as possible. A big part of that process is remembering the knowledge from our key past lives, because some of us were scribes, some of us were high priestesses, some of us were healers, shamans, whatever the case may be. Some of us were warriors, but it all comes into play. So there is good news, and I see good things on the horizon.
How do you see this play out in with respect of the light forces, that are here? As you mentioned, a lot of the MyLab folks infiltrating those underground bases and whatnot, and just everybody does what they need to do, is healers and everything. But how do you see this panning out? Do you see it more like a spiritual warfare, us trying to perhaps visualize the world that we want, or do you see it more proactive? Us really getting engaged in the solution and changing this thing around, turning it around? Or do you see it as a combination of both? I mean, how do you envision this?
Well, hold that thought. Is it okay if I tell my dog to shut up?
Oh, sure.
Just for a moment?
Go right ahead.
Wow.
Amazing.
We love James. He's so knowledgeable.
I know.
Thank you. What I see happening is that the reptilian overlords are shooting for all the marbles, and in the process they're making mistakes. They're working through their hybrid plantation managers, if you will, the big shots on the surface of the planet. And they're shooting for all the marbles. They're putting everything in place. What they cannot prevent is the increasing frequency of this plane we're at. Now, there were articles available on the internet from mainstream scientific websites. And these articles are written by PhDs, and PhDs were quoted in them. And the long and the short of it was, a lot of the physicists were freaking out because they found that not only were unstable elements exhibiting increased particle decay, but they found out, much to their horror, that even stable elements, such as carbon-14, were exhibiting increased particle decay. Now, what are the implications of this for what mainstream scientists refer to as, quote, the fabric of reality? We are carbon-based beings. If even the carbon molecule is manifesting increased decay, right? What does that say about this reality we're in? Well, in layman's terms, and from a gut intuitive level, what I see happening is that the frequencies are increasing, the veils between worlds are thinning, more and more negative entities of various stripes are coming into our plane of existence, but also a lot of highly spiritually evolved beings are coming into our plane of existence. And also, they're physically coming here, not just beings, interdimensional beings, but physical beings. I mean, we see in the Soho Sun observatory imagery, gigantic spherical craft, many times the size of this planet, hanging around the sun and whatnot. And the sun is acting all wonky as well. What we're seeing is the frequency is increasing. And that has got the reptilian overlords in a panic state, because they know that this increase in the frequency is going to engender genetic mutations, if you will, of a positive nature in a lot of people like us, quite frankly, and people who will realize that they do have a mission, because they're if you notice, for example, and I'm talking to your listeners as well, many of us have noticed that the time lag between the intention we send out with our thoughts into the ether, whether we're interested in a particular subject matter or we have questions about this, that, or the other. Well, the lag time between sending out the intent into the ether and the universe responding to us with our answers is rapidly diminishing. Mm-hmm. For some of us, we're getting the answers that we need at a rapid rate. We're meeting the people we need to meet. We seem to be manifesting more. Yeah. And whatever our circumstances, however humble our circumstances are, we can always strive for excellence in all facets of life and how we comport ourselves. And it's important to maintain the inner harmony and the inner equilibrium no matter what goes on around us. And part of that process is becoming more in tune with our surroundings and raising our vibe, because what's happening is the increased vibe, increased frequency is causing people to remember really who they were. People that were already gifted in mediumistic, shamanistic terms are becoming more, their abilities are becoming more enhanced. People that had, let's say, like a lower degree of metaphysical, spiritual abilities, they're finding that their consciousness is expanding, and sometimes expanding many-fold. So this is part of the agenda behind the chemtrails, because they're trying to block out, well, so not only so we don't see two suns, but also, you know, the photonic energy, which activates our higher senses. They want to keep us in this dim, dark, almost cavernous existence on the surface. Mm-hmm. So what I see happening, to answer your question, is more and more people are coming to a realization of who they really are. I don't see, and I'm just being a realist here, unless certain things happen, it's going to be very difficult to avoid the mass culling that's going to take place on the surface. And we're already starting to see that. Not just the incidence of cancer going up in Fukushima and the GMO and the fluoride and everything else, the chemtrails and everything else, the nanoparticles in the chemtrails, which are changing, rewriting our DNA. Yeah. Because it's full spectrum dominance. What they're trying to do, in short, is they're trying to raise the fear and control vibe. It's a race between the relative handful of people who are plugging back into divine source, recognizing who they really are, plugging in and networking with like-minded people, developing their spiritual and metaphysical abilities. It's a race between that smaller demographic of people coming into a realization of who they are and what they're here for, against the larger fear vibe, panic vibe, control vibe. It's a race between the fear on the one hand and all the control that comes with it, and this awakening. Because within the context of this greater mass awakening, people catching on to the surface level stuff we discussed earlier, within that demographic, there's a smaller yet significant number of people who are coming into an awareness of what they're really here to do. And it's not going to take armies of people with this expanded consciousness, expanded awareness to change things. A tipping point will be reached by far fewer people than what I believe we realize, because remember, we have spiritual celestial guidance. I must emphasize that to your listeners. When I hear these Christian fundies say, oh, spirit guides, that's all satanic, they're just demons. Okay, that presupposes every single one of us does not have a single spiritually evolved, either ancestor, deceased in our plane, loved one, or anything in the other higher planes, none of them cares about us. We've been cast adrift. We've been left to shuffle for ourselves. Okay, now think about what a defeatist concept that is, and exactly why these controlling custodial religions push that meme. Mm-hmm. It's disempowering, and it cuts us off from divine source. Right. Now, when we realize that we do have this divine guidance, and we strive to meet it halfway, we cannot expect this divine guidance in all its many forms to do the work for us. We volunteered to come here in physical embodiment with all of its inherent handicaps. Well, we have to break out, and we have to meet our spiritual benefactors halfway, and we have to recognize our inner shadow, but at the same time, we have to not be consumed by notions of vengeance. And you know what? Justice will be meted out to the perps. Absolutely. It's something I think that needs to be done. But we cannot let that be the be-all and the end-all of our existence, and which is the driving force of our motivations. We must operate at a higher spiritual moral plane than that. And I believe that as time goes on, we will start to make a difference. And within the context of the greater awakening, we're already seeing a difference. We see that at the surface level, where the powers that be can't push forward the kinds of agendas and programs they want as easily as they did in the past. They're running into all kinds of resistance. So I think that's a good thing. And I think this is a great time to be alive. The many people, I believe, volunteered to be here to do what we do, but only a relative handful were allowed to take part, because, and I don't say that in an elitist, snobby sense, it's just that we were aware of the hardships, the innate hardships that we were going to have to overcome.
Either that, or we were dumb enough not to read the fine print, right?
Yeah.
That's I think that's a big part of it. Like,
yeah. There's an expression I just read the other day: many are called, few stand up.
Interesting.
Yes, because the path of least resistance is just to stand on the sideline and allow this to happen. And I would encourage your listeners, because I know there are many spiritual warriors listening who will listen to this show. And you are not alone. At a vibratory, energetic level, we are all connected. And it's always better to operate in small cells rather than in large groups, because large groups always get infiltrated, disrupted from within. And we always have to deal with all these people pulling their oars in different directions from where we want to go.
Right.
Wow, that's an interesting point. That is a really interesting perspective there. Thank you.
Yes, it's better to operate with a relative small handful of like-minded individuals. I'd rather run with one than be dragged down by 20. And when the people out there realize that, you know what, this is why I can't seem to make all these people in these UFO meetings understand or recognize the serious issues. They're all still hung up in the lights in the sky form of research, which are designed to go absolutely nowhere. And when some of these people, and many have already come to this realization, but some just need to be given permission to say, hey, it's okay to break off from the rest of this herd, for me to do my own thing. I'm not alone. And each one of you out there can inspire and lead people in these small cells and groups. And I always try to encourage people to be leaders. I never want to be anyone's leader. I want to inspire everyone to be their own leader. And what will happen is, when you become comfortable in your own skin and you realize you don't need to seek the approval of all these people and all these research groups and all these people in these UFO groups, that's when you'll really begin to make strides. That's when spirit will open up to you, and you will get all kinds of guidance, and you will be led to the knowledge and remember and connect with the right people. So don't feel alone. Don't feel like you've been cast adrift. You're a big part of this, all of you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Absolutely. That's well said. I wanted to ask you, just getting back into the reptilian thing again. It has been said, and a lot of people say this, in chat groups and different blog sites and whatever, but that it seems like everyone has reptilian DNA in them somehow. Do you feel that's accurate, or do you feel that there's some people on the planet that do not have reptilian DNA?
I believe that there are a small percentage of people who are infiltrators in their own right, where their DNA is more of other ET races, more, let's say, more of the positive, benevolent races, that they've come here almost like in K-Pack fashion. And we come across accounts of this now and then on the internet, and we hear of these stories of people who don't feel that they've had a lot of incarnations here, that they're kind of new here, right? Mm-hmm. And of course, one of their first responses is utter horror and being appalled at what goes on here. Uh-huh. And then when they realize the nature of this place, it's back to business and do what needs to be done, whether it's healing and uplifting people. So I believe there's an element, a small percentage of people who don't have that original sin, if you will, that predetermined inner shadow that so many of us have to deal with, overcome, recognize, and overcome. I do believe that's the case. Now, if you're an average person who was born into this world in the normal way, and it should be emphasized that these archontic beings will even go to the trouble of arranging our parents, all right? They will even arrange unions, even one-night stands, just to create an offshoot of a bloodline, just because the people they're getting together have, from the standpoint of these archontic beings, the right genetic mix to further and advance their agenda in any direction they want. But it must be pointed out that there's always, in many cases, not always, I shouldn't say that, in many cases, this benevolent, positive ET genetic intervention will also come into play. Because people tend to not only have experiences with reptilians, they often have experiences with other beings, Palladian entities, human-looking entities. They feel a connection to Arcturus, whatever the case may be. And I really believe that there are Arcturians at a higher plane, that they work through a lot of people here on the surface that advance their changes, beneficial changes. So it's some people are like double and triple agents, if you will, to use an example from the surface level espionage, counter-espionage game, where they could have multiple entities and multiple agendas working through them at any one time. It's like a cosmic tug of war. I know people that, they've been rescued. They get abducted by negative aliens, and then they get rescued by their positive protector beings. Yep.
Oh, God! Thank God for that.
Yep.
Yeah. So we're not just cast adrift. We do have positive ET help, as well as higher plane, higher spiritual help. So, getting back to your question, a lot of us have this reptilian DNA. It goes back to the R complex, which is the oldest part of our brain. It's called R because it's reptilian, and I'm sure you've both heard this before. Sure. But the driving impulses within us, the territoriality, the territorial acquisitiveness, the ritualism, the obeisance to higher authority, the sexual aggression, if you will. All those things stem from the reptilian R complex of the brain. And some people have more reptilian DNA than others, and that's why they work through those particular people. And one thing I should have mentioned also is, earlier when I was talking about the creation of serial murderers, the creation of pedophiles, what have you, is the entities will promote ritualism and an abiding interest in magic, and black magic in particular, within the people they're trying to manipulate. Also, the sorcery angle. In its original term, sorcery is the use of oftentimes hallucinogenic, psychoactive plants and substances in order to see in other planes, shamanic visions, and commune with non-human intelligences. It's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, Don Juan and Carlos Castaneda, shamanic cultures throughout history and around the world have done this all along. But of course, the archontic version of that is these entities not only promote black magic practices and delving into really dark arcane arts, but they also promote within some of their hybrids the use of certain drugs like crystal methadone and crank, the derivative of crystal meth. Crystal methadone has a sympathetic resonance to these reptilians and other negative, indeed demonic entities. And when someone starts using crystal meth, and one does not even have to have a preponderance of reptilian DNA. If one indulges in crystal meth, that's a fast track to being taken up as not only a host by a single entity, but sometimes by multiple entities, because the drug, the meth, will resonate at a sympathetic frequency with these entities, and they will immediately jump into the person, and they will start acting out in like bizarre ways and meeting out mayhem to society. A very common facet of behavior of these tweakers, as they're known, these meth users, is they just can erupt in spasms of violence and mayhem. And it's the entities working through them as a physical medium to engender changes in this physical plane. But it should be pointed out that people can be taken up as a host not just by reptilians. Depending on the DNA mix, some people can be taken up as hosts by mantis beings, by greys. It just depends on what the preponderance of DNA is. Also, some people are what we call a collective, that they can be taken up by multiple entities. So a psychic who has the ability to see the entities overshadowing the host human, they can be confused, because one moment they look at someone, they see a mantis being, the next day they see the same person, they see a reptilian entity or a hairy-looking trollish being inhabiting the person. It just varies. Did any of you gals want to ask a question?
Yeah, I have a quick question on that.
And I do too.
Okay.
Oh, sure.
All right. Just to clarify and see maybe you have this answer. Can that also be experienced? In other words, can someone, not necessarily with crystal meth, for example, but using natural plants as a way, like ayahuasca, for example, is it possible that a person can go into a state where they're actually possessed or receive information from these entities, thinking that they're getting it from higher beings, and in reality it's something else? Is that possible?
I suppose anything is possible. I've never done ayahuasca. The people that I know who have done it with the guidance of a shaman who can literally telepathically commune with them when they're going through the ayahuasca trip. Mm-hmm. So everyone I know that's done ayahuasca has done it under the guidance of a shaman or a person who's utilized the plant many times. I suppose it's possible if the ayahuasca, for example, is taken in a place where there's a naturally occurring vortex area and there are negative entities in this particular vortex area. Yeah, I could see how in a particular altered state, a person can come under malign influence. I could see that happening. I wouldn't want to take ayahuasca like in a haunted house or something like that. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
But it's not just ayahuasca. It's psilocybin. It's people like that smoke like burnout weed that they don't even get high off it. They just burn out. That kind of thing can lead to a malign influence, because what these entities do is they will not only encourage people to take these drugs, but say if someone is trying to quit like meth or quit pot, right? And there's no question that cannabis has medicinal properties, and can open up the higher centers, especially if it's imbibed in the right way, right? And if it's treated with respect as a consciousness in its own right, instead of abused for merely recreational purposes. If it's used for a therapeutic consciousness expanding way or for health purposes, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. In fact, that's why they've made it all legal. But there's some people who, for whatever reason, can only get a hold of like burnout weed, right? Or they even abuse what some would consider to be high-grade pot. And what these entities do, if the person is trying to quit, whether it's alcohol, whether it's pot, whether it's crank, they can once again create a stage-managed dream within the person. So let's say they want the person to get back to smoking pot, and then get them in a lower vibe where they can manipulate them and they're always burnt out and they become listless and lethargic and unmotivated. And all those are states of archontic ennui, let's say.
Right.
Well, what they do is, because the nature of smoking is very ceremonial and ritualistic, inherently ritualistic and ceremonial. For example, look at the way the Native Americans, where they proceed and end many ceremonies and councils and get-togethers with pipe smoking, of mugwort, of tobacco, pot, whatever the case may be. What the archontic entities do is exploit that ritualistic aspect. So the person will find themselves in a dream where they have to, like in the old days, they would have to separate like the weed from the pot, and that in itself is a ritualistic process. Then they have to manipulate, knead the pot, so they can either put it into a pipe bowl or roll it in a paper. But it's a process, and then sometimes they will be with other people in these dreams, other pot smokers. Some people they know from the past. Some, like right out of central casting, stoner-looking people. And they will even, the simulation in these virtual environments are such, they will even put like posters on the wall, like Zeppelin posters or Scorpions posters, right? Just to kind of harken back to the person's youth, when they used to smoke a lot. So they finally get around to lighting the joint or lighting the pot, and then the process of passing the pipe around and each person taking an inhalation. So the person who they're manipulating is forced to watch as each person takes a hit, they pass it. The next person takes a hit, they pass it. The anticipation builds up. The weed finally gets around to them. They take a deep inhalation, a deep drag. What some people have described is they wake up and they're taking a deep drag off an imaginary joint or imaginary pipe because they're still deep in the dream. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
And the intention behind it is to make the person, without even realizing it, wake up, and the first thing they do is want to go out and meet people they know have got pot so they can smoke out and basically get back into the habit. Or they do it with alcohol, where if a person has have stopped drinking alcohol for a while, they can have dreams where people are passing around a bottle of Jim Beam, let's say, rancid old Jim Beam, and they are passing around a bottle, taking shots and drinking, just like when they were young. And then they get to their turn and they take the drink. See, in the split second before awakening, because, as I mentioned earlier, these entities have the ability to tap into our memory banks and make us relive past trauma along with the body memories and the real-life memories going through in real time of the past trauma and the abuse that engendered that. Well, the same thing with this drug manipulation, where the split second, the moment before awakening, they can really engender within the person the feeling of being high from pot, the feeling from being drunk on alcohol, the feeling of being on crank or crystal meth. So when they wake up from these dreams, they momentarily have that high again. Okay? Some people, Barbara Bartley, like my late great mentor, she's worked with people who've woken up and to find a literal gray entity injecting them with a syringe filled with methamphetamine, just to get them back on the drug, or they wake up and they find powder under their nose. Okay, so and now just to elaborate a little further, this whole drug agenda has gone through the roof with the rave agenda. So not only do you have the psychiatric pharmacological tyranny, where some of the SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, not only destroy cognitive function, which make it easier for these entities to take control of their minds, but also literally lower their vibrations to allow these entities to take them up as host.
Wow.
So not only is there a pharmacological big pharma aspect, but there's also this illicit drug aspect, and it's taken on a whole nother level the last 25, 30 years with the rave agenda, because ecstasy not only divests people of a lot of inhibitions, again, the whole frontal lobe complex inhibition aspect, and not only does it make people feel really groovy and touchy-feely and with archontic manipulation, because these entities, reptilians, greys, snake entities, they pollute these raves. And remember, some of these European raves, there could be hundreds of thousands of people there. And so because all these people are resonators, and they're resonating in this group consciousness, not only are they, many of them, on the drug ecstasy, which removes inhibition. Some people are having intercourse right there in the open, okay? And what these entities do is they just, psychic people, and because the rave drugs, the ecstasy, gets them into that frequency, a lot of them can see the entities around them. Oh, yes, that's the case. They can see greys around them. They can see reptilians around them. They can see these snake entities around them. And what they see sometimes is there'll be a cluster of people on the rave dance floor, and they'll all be grooving or just grooving on each other, having intercourse, making out, whatever the case may be. These entities are above them are just getting bigger and stronger and sucking up all that loosh. And sometimes the entities will literally take up people as momentary hosts and feel, because it's all about a sensate nature. That's why a lot of the cross-dressing takes place in the S&M programming agendas, because anything of a sensate nature, whether it's masochism, inflicting pain, cross-dressing to wear certain types of clothes to feel the sensation of these clothes on one's skin, a lot of it is of a sensate nature, because entities exist outside of our physical density. So when they take up these people, even as momentary hosts, they can feel all this around us. It's all about energetic harvesting and emotional harvesting. So just to put a wrap on this whole rave thing, and not only that, though, but long-term usage of rave leads to lower back problems, and it goes on and on. So you have all these people debilitated by ecstasy. I meant to say the ecstasy long-term use leads to back problems in many cases. So these people are resonating in these frequencies. I believe that a lot of these rave locations are definitely in naturally occurring vortex areas, because I've known some of the leaders of the rave movement in California, young guys at the time, much older now, but a lot of these raves took place on Indian reservations in Southern California and other places, and places where there are naturally occurring ley lines and vortex areas. So what these entities do is they establish strongholds, energetic strongholds in these areas where all these raves take place, and then in a microcosmic fashion they take up strongholds in all these ravers. Okay, so
wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh,
I didn't know anything about that.
So
did you have any? Well, we still got time. I don't even know if I answered a lot of your questions.
Oh, you did. So
did you have any other questions that?
Yes. Yes. James, you've spoken quite a lot about DNA. Most people today don't know really what DNA is, not even the scientific community. We know we have 2 strands that are active and many other strands that they are calling junk DNA, and some people are speculating that some of those strands actually are multidimensional and go into other dimensions, which is why we can't see what their function is. Have you come across in your research of a better definition of what DNA is and why it's so important in this reptilian overlord agenda?
That's an outstanding question, by the way. If we look at just the findings that mainstream science has come up with, that DNA is liquid crystalline in nature, that DNA are transceivers of energetic frequencies and essentially information. They are receivers and they're transmitters of information. And I'm absolutely convinced, as your question implies, that some of what is referred to as junk DNA is not junk at all. And I believe that some of the more enhanced, genetically enhanced DNA, let's say, from this, that, or the other, sometimes multiple different ET groups, positive and negative, it allows these positive and negative beings to interact with us at deep levels.
Right.
And because we are innately metaphysical beings. When we sleep, we go dimension hopping, and some of us have the ability to lucid dream, some of us can astral travel, some of us can remote view. And some of the people, many of the abductees in my labs, the ones that I know very well, and many people with mediumistic, shamanistic abilities, yogic abilities, I believe they have this advanced, let's not say advanced, let's say enhanced DNA. And because they have disciplined themselves, trained themselves to be receptive in a discerning way to this these energetic downloads, the spiritual guidance, if you will, they have learned to develop these capabilities. Now, of course, the archontic aspect of that is they imbue all these loathsome characteristics in the people they're trying to create, all these categories of people they're trying to create, turn them, let's say in the metaphysical realm, they're trying to create, and have been quite successful over time, to turn people into malevolent warlocks, into malevolent adepts and black magicians, and dark archontic manipulators, right? And they will openly work with those people. Many of these full-on reptilian human hybrids that have these metaphysical abilities, they know darn well that their familiars are reptilians and other entities and Dracos, because they can see them with their psychic vision. And sometimes they will manifest and densify in full physical form in front of them. Sometimes they will take their reptilian Draco human hybrids on astral journeys into the underground cavern systems and introduce them and show them to essentially their kinfolk, right? The reptilian civilizations which live underground. And there's multiple reptilian civilizations. They don't all work together. Some are in conflict with each other. I don't know if I answered your question, though.
The DNA, yeah. I think there is an interest in the DNA by these other beings.
Yes.
That is far more complex and sophisticated than we understand, I think. And I'm just trying to get a better understanding.
Yes. Okay, thank you for getting me back on track. See, DNA is a currency of the universe. And within the DNA from these different ET groups, positive and negative, there are innate metaphysical capabilities, which when imbued, when that ET of DNA of various stripes is imbued into these hybrid bloodlines, well, you have these latent metaphysical abilities with the potential to tap into and plug into higher or lower, depending on what's going on with a person, spiritual planes. It makes it easier for these people to tap into these higher and or lower planes of spiritual planes of existence. And again, what it revolves around to is personal responsibility and personal choice. I have made myself receptive to these higher frequencies. I consciously and unconsciously tell myself and know that these higher frequencies are having a beneficial effect on my DNA, I welcome the changes. I don't block them out. I don't densify further, because it defeats the purpose of this whole consciousness, awareness, expanding, vibrational lifting effort that I'm trying to do, where I talk to block out these frequencies, fearful that they may negatively impact my DNA, because the fluoride in the water affects our DNA. The GMO affects our DNA. The chemtrails and the HARP and everything. The negative. The sound.
Yep.
The TV programming. The reality TV. The archontically influenced, destabilized people around us affect our DNA. There's one book, there was a couple of books I could recommend in the short time that we have, because it speaks to the connection we have with the information field that David Icke talks about. Professor Stanislav Grof, or is it Grof? Grov, I think, Grof. Yeah. Wrote a book called The Holotropic Mind. And what he and his fellow researchers did was, using a combination of breathing techniques and judicious use of LSD, and yes, I know about all the CIA LSD programs. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about these researchers, Stanislav Grof and his team, with a judicious, prudent utilization of LSD, along with breathing techniques, allow people to relive the birthing process. Because even in hospitals, look at the trauma involved. While we have the time.
Oh yeah.
Of just being birth, instead of simply letting the child catch his breath after 7 or 8 minutes, what do they immediately do? They cut off the umbilical cord, and when the kid doesn't breathe on his own, whack, right? It's completely backwards opposite. Well, going through the birth canal itself is a traumatic event, and these people going through Grov's therapy relive the birthing experience, and as a result, healing takes place. But they found that when people really go deep into the process, they can go back to the point when they were the original sperm racing the other sperm up the fallopian tube, getting to the ovum and initiating cell division. They can plug into the matrix to the extent in these breathing exercises. After a while, they just use breathing exercise. They don't even need the LSD anymore.
Wow.
Where they can plug into the information field, and they can feel and be a tree. They can feel what it feels like to be a tree, and how alive the tree it is, how energetically connected it is with everything else. Not only that, though, but they can go back into time and observe their ancestors who passed away many generations before they were even alive, and see and feel what it was like for that person to be alive. Because we have this within us. We are multidimensional infinity, as David Icke says, as he points out again and again and again. So that book, The Holotropic Mind, by Dr. Stanislav Grof. Another good book, two good books, is Beyond the Quantum by Michael Talbot, as well as the Holographic Universe by Michael Talbot. Folks, don't be afraid about reading books about Hermeticism. Don't be afraid about reading books about Theosophy. It's the intent behind it all. There's been a lot of corruption in a lot of these white brotherhoods. I hate to use it because it's a patriarchal term, brotherhood. But these sisterhoods too, okay? That celestial stellar wisdom was brought forward. A lot of it was eradicated by wiping out the indigenous societies, wiping out the shamans and medicine men and medicine women, what have you. But a lot of it is crept forward, and we can tap into that, folks. We can tap into that and plug in. And that's one of the ways. Embrace your past lives. Read historical novels about eras and cultures that you know you had a past life in. Many of these novelists have done their homework, so you can read about what it's like to walk the streets, the flora, the fauna, the sculptures, the statues. But also many of these novelists have had karmic issues where many of them lived these past lives, and they're getting downloads without realizing it. And so when you read these historical novels, you can plug into that frequency again. and you can begin to reacquire all these disparate parts of yourself.
Wow.
So thank you once again for letting me come on.
Oh my gosh, James!
Your show.
Today was like wow. Wow. That's all
James,
I can.
You're so awesome.
Yes, you are.
Well, you gals are awesome,
Yes,
and your
you
listeners are awesome.
Yes, you are.
And we will overcome, and we will bring this planet and this whole plane to a higher level. We
will, and that's why we're here. So, James, thank you very much for joining us today. You have all been, of course, listening to James Bartley. This has been part 2 of the end of the Reptilian Overlordship. There's a reason for that title. And
right.
And then of course you've been listening to Shattering the Matrix, your hosts Ari Kopel and Serena. We're here every Saturday evening, 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I hope you all join our website as well. That's 2012emergence.com. That's 2012emergence.com. And James, thank you very much. I'm looking forward to the next part 3. That will be incredible. It just keeps getting better and better each time.
Well, thank you, both of you gals. I really appreciate the opportunity to share. Thank
Not
you.
a problem. Thank you all for listening, and we'll catch you next time. Thank you, James. But good night.
Bye.
Good night. Bye.
You've been listening to Shattering the Matrix with your host, Ari Kopel and Serena. Please visit our website, 2012emergence.com. That's 2012emergence.com. Find us on Twitter at Matrix Shattered, and like us on Facebook at facebook.com/Shattering the Matrix. Listen to archived shows at blogtalkradio.com/Shattering the Matrix. And join us next time for the birth of the new golden era on Shattering the Matrix.